All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Francis Ukwo. I am a fourth year International Bachelor of Arts student, double majoring in political science and English, and welcome to BA Professional. In case you're new here, BA Professional is a live career series organized by the Faculty of Humanities and Social Sciences, where we speak to different alumni of the faculty and get key info on how they were able to and how we can also forge our own unique career path. Now, without further ado, I am very happy to have with me here today as a guest, Carl Mercer. Hi, Carl.
Hi, it's great to be here.
Hi.
Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you for being here today. For those of you who don't know Carl, I'll tell you a couple of things about him. He's currently the Senior Communications Advisor and lead speechwriter in the Office of the President of the 76th session of the General Assembly. Carl previously provided communications and speechwriting support to both the 73rd and 75th presidents of the General Assembly. In addition to that, he has also worked in the Office of the President of the General Assembly. Carl spent 7 years with the United Nations Development Program, most easily just called UNDP, where he focused on communications and advocacy around climate change, disaster risk reduction, sustainable energy, as well as other environmental issues. Carl has previously worked for non-governmental organizations in Angola, Chad, Ethiopia, France, Indonesia, Liberia, South Sudan, and the United Republic of Tanzania, as well as the United States. Quite a list there. Carl holds a BA in political science from Memorial University of Newfoundland and Labrador, as well as a Master of Arts in International Relations, Conflict and Human Rights from, correct me if I'm getting this wrong, Utrecht?
That's correct.
All right, perfect. Utrecht University up in the Netherlands. Now, Carl, do you mind if I ask you a couple of questions?
No, please go ahead.
All right, perfect. So our first question today is if you could give us a little insight on what your job in the United Nations is the senior communications and lead speechwriter. What does that really entail? What does an average day look like for you?
Sure. So I'll preface that by saying that the UN is obviously very, very large. And when I joined the UN, I was at the UNDP, doing climate, disaster risk reduction. Right now, I happen to be in the president's office. So you can be in the UN and be in a country office, a regional office. You can be focused on very specific thematic areas. Or you can be in the president's office, such as I am, or the SG's office, Secretary General, where you're sort of the nexus of kind of everything that's swirling around you. So for us, every day kind of changes to whatever's happening right now. So the COVID variant, for instance, that was announced a few days ago has become the hot topic that is happening right now. So every day is really for me, read the news, see what the big issues are going to be, what are we going to be talking about, what do member states want to talk about. As the lead speechwriter, one of my main tasks, of course, the president gives 10, 15, 20 speeches a week, both in the General Assembly and at invited functions by member states and by various institutions, universities included. Memorial should consider inviting him to speak. Um, and
Keep that in mind.
yeah, so one of the things I do is to look at the speeches that are coming in from the other speechwriters and make sure that they all align with the messaging, the tone, the way he likes to speak, just the structure. It can be everything from grammatical things to actually like large scale messaging plans and advocacy initiatives, and to get those submitted on time so they can be reviewed and then finalized. It also involves a lot of speechwriting myself. So sometimes I'll write three or four in a day, sometimes it's quiet. I actually prefer writing them. It's kind of fun. But that's all that happens. And then if that's the speech writing part, the other side is the comms advisory part. So, and we link those together because you really need your speechwriters to know what your overall advocacy objectives are. And we look ahead down the road and what it is the president wants to advocate for. And I'll go back to the vaccine issue. Vaccine equity is sort of our big thing on the horizon right now. We're having a big event in January. So we're trying to nail down what our messaging is on that and how we're going to get that out there to the media, to social media, and make sure it all aligns so that our speeches reflect exactly what it is that we're trying to say. So all those things sort of happen.
That's super interesting. It kind of involved as different issues kind of happen around the world. You can get to kind of have hands-on experience. That's pretty cool. My next question would be, you're kind of doing a lot, two different things in the UN right now. What would you say inspired you to kind of go down this particular career path?
Um, it, that's interesting. I wouldn't have said when I was a student in Mon that I was going Mon, sorry. I'm not sure what we're calling it now for short. But I do love the new longer name, by the way. I wouldn't have thought I was going to be a speechwriter, head of comms at the time. I definitely figured out I wanted to work in international development for a start, and it was a volunteer opportunity with Canada World Youth. I went to South Africa when I was after my second or third year at Memorial, and did a few months volunteering there, and that sort of pushed me into the direction of international development. From that point, though, of course, your career path changes as you go, as life does. It pushes you in different directions, opportunities arise, and you either take them or don't. So, I've ended up in very interesting places, and I'm happy where I am. But it hasn't always been as clear cut as what I thought it was going to be. When I thought I was going
For
to go to law
sure.
school, you know.
Yeah, I can imagine. I mean, we all have an idea of what we'd like to do. That doesn't necessarily mean that life's going to allow us to.
Mhm.
My next question would be, was there any particular strategy that you would say was kind of vital in making the transition from first kind of from your work from being in school to then the workforce? You kind of mentioned kind of going on some opportunity abroad during your schooling, but was there any kind of particular strategy that you were kind of following that helped you make that transition easily?
Yes, absolutely. So, like a lot of students, I didn't know what it is I wanted to do in the first few years. I think I was third year, going into fourth year at Memorial before I actually knew what it is that I wanted to work on. And that kind of then led to some direction. Um, I applied for another government funded program, and you're very lucky. Canada has a lot of great programs. And I actually looked this up this morning. It still exists. It's the International Youth Internship Program at what used to be CETA and now is Global Affairs Canada. And Memorial University is actually a partner until 2022 or into 2022. So there are grants available for students that I definitely recommend. So I sort of identified opportunities like that, other ones that existed. I don't recall the names off the top of my head, but there were multiple opportunities as like sort of extended paid internships that I could do to get some actual experience. Because one of the things as a BA student sometimes is that you don't actually get, and I was always so envious of the engineering students and the people who actually had more hands-on experience. And I thought that that would be something to get. This allowed me to get that. I went to Ethiopia for 6 months, funded by the government of Canada, so I was paid. And because of the work I did, that then turned into my first consulting job to stay in Ethiopia for an additional 6 months and keep working there. And then it kind of snowballed from there. So my advice really is to early on, once you take that time to figure out what you want, look at all the different areas that you can begin to volunteer or get an internship or network your way into some sort of opening because that's actually how it really begins.
Just quick question, piggybacking off that. If you don't mind just letting us know how you made that initial connection, how you even heard about the INTL.
Oh, I think I just Googled it. I think I actually just
Mhm.
looked it up. It wasn't available to the Memorial at the time, and I did mine through the Cody Institute at St. Francis Xavier. So it was through a different one. And I think I was accepted to another one at St. Mary's because you apply to a couple different programs in a couple different universities. So I'm sure there are students applying to Memorial as well. But I think it was that I kind of looked around.
Kind of going based off that, kind of one of the questions I had kind of later down the line was if you had any particular kind of extracurricular or even volunteer experiences involving in clubs or society that you would specifically recommend possibly to current BA students that you think might have been really beneficial maybe during your time at Memorial?
Absolutely. That's a good question. So for me, once I knew I wanted to work abroad and I knew I wanted to get my foot in the door that way, I I volunteered in a few places. I worked with the International Students Association. I can't, that might not be what it's called now, of Memorial. So I sort of had what they called at the time like a friend, foster brother type thing, where I helped new students kind of get situated at Memorial. I worked with the Association for New Canadians, I think it's called, to help families who were being resettled at the time. A lot of them were from Sudan to get settled in Newfoundland, and that was sort of like taking their phone calls, advising them where to get groceries and things like that. And that just again like from your own self-seeking point of view, it helps your resume. It shows that
Yeah.
you're working on the betterment of the community. You're getting involved. You're culturally sensitive. And it also just is fun and feels nice and it helps other people. So I definitely recommend those types of things.
I believe Mon still has something similar. The peer mentor network is something very similar, kind of dealing with new students. They have one specifically for international students, like you mentioned, and one for just kind of widely just first year students in general. Perfect. Thank you for that answer. Kind of my next question is kind of taking a little diversion here is was there any particular skills that you would say you learned during your time at MUN that you say that you're still using kind of when you made the transition to the workforce and even like right up till today?
Yes, absolutely. Because of the nature of the work that I do as a speechwriter, communications, the endless hours of research and writing and getting grammar correct and that definitely plays into it. You need to be able to write well. You need to be able to articulate yourself well. Good research. The last thing you want is someone to give a speech and find out that uh, what they what they're saying is completely inaccurate or taken from somewhere else. You know, those rules that are kind of pounded into you to avoid plagiarism, etc. That stuff is very important. So
Definitely.
that I carry with me. I would say also the discipline of being able to attend class, but also afterwards to do the stuff you have to do. You brush it off, but it's kind of treat you even as loosely as they treat students. You know, a job is a job is a job, so you kind of have to do it.
That's really interesting. I think lots of BA students like the skills of research and writing and whatnot are really kind of hammed down into you. But like you said, it's pretty useful skill. One question I really wanted to ask was there any particular point where you kind of made a decision and knew, okay, I want to work in the UN, or did that kind of just snowball kind of from the other things you were involved in?
No, for me, there was definitely a point. Um, so as I said that, you know, my career took a few different paths and turns. I'm still in the same overall sphere of where I set out, but I didn't know I was going to work in communications. You know, I thought I was going to work for the World Food Program if I worked for the UN at all, or UNHCR and do humanitarian work. I didn't think I was going to be at headquarters in New York doing political stuff with mandates and resolutions and that kind of thing. So it's taken a few, and like you said before, I used to work in climate change for UNDP. And years ago, I was with NGOs. For me, the point was I was working for NGOs, and I was spending a lot of time in Africa and Asia, and they do really, really good work on the ground, delivering medications, helping people where they actually need it. But from my point, I was more interested in the kind of the macro level stuff that had to happen, the policies, the macroeconomic things that had to change for like grand transformational global change. You know, you can feed a community, but how do you make sure that you stop food insecurity in a region? You know, that takes a lot of dialogue and policy. So once I knew that I wanted to work in that area, that definitely pushed me more towards government or the UN. And I chose the UN for various reasons, and that's where I ended up.
Perfect. That's pretty cool. Um, Kind of something, especially I'm thinking for people who are interested in international development and international relations as a whole. Kind of the UN is almost it's a goal for a lot of people. What kind of advice would you give to current BA students that might be interested in pursuing a career similar to yours?
That's a great question. And I actually get that one a lot. So I think my main piece of advice on that one is, um, and going back to the beginning, the UN is massive. Pretty much any issue the world covers is covered by the UN. And there is an agency or a body or you know subsidiary created specifically to cover that issue. So you can't just say like I want to work for the UN. It has to be like a little more defined. Now, where are your interests? We have people here on our team who work in gender equality, people on climate change, people on disaster risk reduction, sustainable energy, like fisheries, oceans, law of the sea. You discover that there are agencies you didn't even know existed. You know, apparently there's UNUSA, the United Nations Office for Outer Space Affairs. So you really need to fine tune the direction you want to go in. Once you know that, look at their websites, look at their documents, find out what they do exactly, and then actually reach out to people and set up informational interviews and talk to them. You know, you're not soliciting a job directly. You're just getting to know what it is. What was their journey like? That helps you decide then what experience you need and where you need to work on. My second piece of advice, much more practical, is to apply for either, if you're definitely coming out of a bachelor's, apply for an internship. And the UN does have internships. A lot of them are paid internships now, which is great. Apply for internships. If you have a master's, if you're lucky enough to move on to a master's, apply for consultancies. Don't try to jump into a staff position at the UN because they get thousands of applications and it can be very discouraging. I made that mistake myself for a very long time until I realized apply for consultancy, let that kind of snowball itself into a staff position.
Mhm. That's great advice. Thank you for that. Now, you've already kind of mentioned something around what my next question was going to be. You mentioned reaching out to people who might be in similar positions as what you are kind of looking to and kind of asking for advice and things like that. But do you mind kind of actually, um, what's the word I'm looking for here? Kind of actually talking to us about how networking specifically has played a role in your career specifically?
Yeah, absolutely. Networking is that thing that's, you know, not always the most pleasant thing to do. Sometimes it's a little bit challenging.
Yeah.
It's not comfortable always, and I've been doing it for years, and I still get uncomfortable. And the thing is that it doesn't end when you get a job because in today's market, a lot of people, especially, and I admire this with the new generation, they're much more quicker to move along to different jobs, different roles, and there's a bit of that in my sphere as well. If you want to move, you have to move laterally, you have to move in different directions. So you have to always be networking. Um, and it can feel a little forced, like you go over to somebody and you force yourself to talk to them and you ask them about their job. And that comes off as a little, sometimes aggressive, sometimes a little too direct, um, almost like you're trying to force an interview. If you can keep it as natural as possible, for me, it was always, you know, direct in that, look, I'm trying to get into this next step. I would like to find out more. Can we have a chat, a coffee, an informational interview? I just want to hear how you did it. That always helps. Keep it even more casual. If you're not directly looking for something, just get to know people in departments that you are already going to collaborate with. Um, Again, go for coffees, go for drinks, go talk, get together. Uh, it's just sort of here at the UN, thankfully, in many ways, it's an organic part of it. There are so many different receptions and events that you're always, in a way, networking. But there are times that I don't want to go to something and I really am like, oh, I'm just tired, I want to go home. But I know that it's a good career move to go because you need to be seen as doing that, you know.
For sure.
And I was going to highlight an actual example recently where I was at COP26 in Scotland, and I saw, the Prime Minister there, and I saw one of his senior staff members, and I just said, okay, I'm going to go over and say hello to his senior staff member. I wasn't going to interrupt the Prime Minister, just because, I respect her work, and I was like, okay, I'm just going to force myself to go do it. It's a little uncomfortable, but, I didn't ask for anything. I just said hello, but it's sort of the thing you have to do. And I ended up getting her business card and being in contact with one of her contacts. So it does help. You have to keep doing it.
For sure. Would you have any tips for people, students who might have a harder time kind of collaborating with others and maybe reaching out? Any tips and tricks that might make it a bit easier? I know reaching out for things like if it's a reference and things like that, it is very nerve-wracking. And you said it's something you do relatively often. Is there any kind of tips and tricks that you have that you'd like to pick in your brain, let us know?
Yeah, so I mean, it gets easier as you go along. Think of myself now, and I'm much more direct than I used to be. I used to be terrified about doing it, and now I just do it. And the only advice I can say is that they're just people going through the same thing you are. They understand. They've been in your shoes, and if you look at it that way, they're just offering you the same. You're just asking them to do the same thing that somebody once did for them. So you don't have to be nervous or shy. You kind of just got to put it aside or find the way to just go ahead and make yourself do it. Um, the one regret, this goes back to the skills that you mentioned. I would say the one regret I had while I was at Memorial is that I didn't take advantage of any of the public speaking classes that they had. Um, and I would tell anybody now, do it because you're going to have to do it. Um, if you don't do it while you're in school, surrounded by your peers in school, you're going to do it when you go out into the real world and or not do it, and that will hinder your career growth. Um, I've had to do it the hard way and do it during my job. And over in my early years, I dreaded it. It was so hard. But now I've gotten good at it and I can handle it. It doesn't cause any anxiety. But if you can do that when you're younger, do it and get it out of the way. Like get comfortable speaking in front of people and being able to laugh at yourself because it'll make things much easier.
One quick question I would really like to ask is you did political science during your bachelor's and then international relations and kind of um, fields that we would expect the kind of in the general area, right? Are there any particular fields of study you would recommend for someone who might be looking to pursue a career in the UN? I believe political science is the most um, one you would expect, but it might not be the only one. So, are there any other ones you would recommend?
Yes, so within that sphere, and actually I'll say I studied international relations at Utrecht, but in reality at the time, that course was called Conflict Studies and Human Rights. And they renamed it International Relations or put it under the umbrella of international relations at a later time. I think that it's important to, so I chose that because at the time I had just lived in Chad for a while and I was very interested in conflict and human rights and that kind of thing, of sphere. And I'm now working communications because I wrote my theses on communications in those types of environments. But I would say looking under the umbrella of political science and then going back to Memorial, I remember it was around my third or fourth year that I did a course on the politics of food that kind of directed me, where they had somebody come who had worked at the World Food Program that directed me into that kind of international thought process of like, okay, how does the food on our plate get here? How much politics goes into that from the provincial, national, international level to make sure that happens? And that really got my brain thinking and it made me want to work in that sphere. So I would say like definitely branch out into different subsections.
For sure. I think the BA does a good job of that with the breadth of knowledge requirement. By the time you get later in your degree, you kind of have a good understanding, at least basic knowledge of kind of the different areas in the humanities and social sciences faculty. You mentioned about regretting not taking advantage of more not political science, public speaking uh, opportunities while you were at MUN. Are there any other things that you might say you maybe would have liked to indulge in or take advantage of while you were at MUN that you think might have made your transition to the workforce easier?
Hmm. Not that I can think of off the top of my head. It's a good question, but nothing I can think of really.
Oh no, just the public speaking one was a pretty good one anyways. Um, kind of my last question just to close off would be just as a whole, kind of the whole idea of the BA professional, the career series is that a lot of BA students are worried about career prospects and what they're going to do after they graduate. What advice would you give to any student who might be getting down in the dumps about the career prospects, possibly about when they finish their schooling?
My short answer is don't be down in the dumps about it. You're going to be fine. The longer answer is you're going to have to be proactive because any job, it's not like when you graduate with a more technical trade oriented job where it's just like they're waiting for somebody to fill a specific role. With something that's a little more nebulous like political science, you will have to find that role that fits you. And so I think, as I said before, you need to identify, just like I said with the UN, you identify the type of work, whether it's the World Food Program or UNHCR or UNICEF that you are interested in. That covers all of the Bachelor of Arts as well. If you want to work in journalism, do you want to work in journalism covering, evening news coverage? Do you want to be a correspondent in the field? Once you identify the type of work you want to do, you can kind of tailor your Bachelor of Arts to kind of go in that direction. You identify the companies and the individuals who represent exactly what it is you want, whether or not you ever actually get to that exact point. And that helps you kind of move into covering the skills you need. My current person that I look at is like, oh, I would love to have that kind of job is, President Biden's spokesperson, Jen Psaki. I just think she's fantastic. And I'm just like, oh, I love what she does. I'd love to do something like that one day. So look for people and companies and individuals who kind of represent that. And I'm not going to meet Jen Psaki. I'm not going to coffee with her because I don't know her. But
Mhm.
it helps give you a direction to focus on of what it is you want to do, and then you can kind of work on, okay, how do I fill these gaps in my resume? How do I make sure I have an internship that complements my BA, that makes it move in this direction? How do I choose my courses selectively? And that really helps because then when you get out, you're going to hit the ground running and you know what it is you want. If you just emerge with a very general, I don't really know, I mean, no one's going to come to you and say, well, we know for you. You've got to come with some understanding yourself. And that I think that applies everywhere.
Perfect. Definitely be specific and intentional, what I got up from that answer. So,
Absolutely.
anyways, Carl, thank you so much for taking the time to be here. I got a lot from your answers. I'm sure all our viewers did do. So thank you so much for being here and answering our questions. And thank you for everyone watching. I really enjoyed our BA professionals up until this point. And I hope you guys have a good rest of your day.